All right, welcome back to Virtual School Assembly, Teacher Professional Development Edition. Today our guest is Dali Rivera. Dali is the creator of the Anti-Bullying and Diversity Academy, a series of online mini courses and in-person workshops for parents, guardians, and educators to learn how to teach our kids how to prevent and stop bullying, and methods to teach how to embrace others' differences as well as their own in order to reduce bullying. Obviously, this is a topic that's really critical right now, so we're so excited to have Dali here. Dali is also a U.S. Army veteran, a speaker, a parent of 2 young girls, wife of a disabled veteran. She earned a master's degree in women and gender studies from Towson University in Maryland. Dali, thank you so much for being here on the show with us today.
So I got into the coaching or an education of bullying due to a personal experience. Now, having been an immigrant child who had to assimilate at the age of 7 into the United States, I faced a lot of bullying as a child, just for my own differences, right? And back then, of course, I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that it didn't feel good. I couldn't really speak to my parents because they were, adjusting to things as well. And there was a language barrier on their behalf, and mine too, because I was learning the language. So when things happened to me, I wasn't very confident in my parents being able to advocate for me. Then fast forward years later, after I got out of the military and everything, and I had children, I was really excited that my 5-year-old, she was starting school, and she would looking forward to getting on the bus and going to school, feeling all big and stuff. So she ended up having a really tough time when she was bullied by another 5-year-old. The 5-year-old had 2 older brothers. I'm going to name him just Devon, just for the sake of the story. So Devon, 5 years old, had a 7 and a 9-year-old brother. And Devon had asked my daughter out, and she declined. She didn't think anything of it. She was like, I'm 5, I can't have a boyfriend, because we taught her, right? So my husband and I would walk her to the bus stop. And every time that we'd walk her up to the bus stop, we kind of started noticing that Devon's 2 brothers were getting a little aggressive, and they would say things like, man up, you got to toughen up, you got to show them who's boss, things like that. Now, being that I have a background in women and gender studies, that little light bulb came on. I was like, ooh, that's toxic masculinity. This is crazy. I'm watching this happen, with a 5-year-old, these little kids. And my husband looked at me. He's like, oh my gosh, yes, you're so nerdy, but you're right. He's like, that's right. So we did whatever we could to stop this from happening. But the other thing that I noticed is that the little boy, Devon, was full of pain. He was angry and he was humiliated. And for like a split second, my eyes locked with his, and I saw just him trying to use every bit of energy to not cry in front of everyone. And he would tell them stop, and they would shout these horrible things to him. And of course, that anger was let out on the other kids, including my daughter. When I went to report bullying, and this is something that I like to share because I think a lot of teachers and parents kind of don't see the full picture sometimes unless it happens. So I went to report what was happening to the bus driver, because that's what you do, right? The first adult of authority. And the bus driver couldn't do anything because all of the little kids in the bus were intimidated and afraid to speak up. So I said, okay, well, I'll go to the principal, because I was a new parent, 5, that's my oldest, 5 years of experience as a parent, right? I go to the principal and she says, it's out of my hands. I can't do anything. It didn't happen on school grounds. And I was floored. I was so upset because I didn't know that there were policies set in place by the school. I did not know that the bus company was in charge and they had their own protocols, for incidents. That's what catapulted me into bullying education. And now by then my daughter had already been in Head Start. I had seen some altercations at a young age, little things that I didn't really understand how impactful and how much bigger it would amplify as they get older. Another example I can give you is one time during Head Start, the little kids had all these little colored chairs. One of them happened to be pink. And a little boy was sitting on a pink chair, and they were coloring, going about their own business. Suddenly he stops, looks at my daughter, he kind of looks over, and he says, you're sitting on a blue chair, I'm sitting on a pink chair. you need to give up your seat. And I was like, what? And I was in class that day. I was so surprised. And she said, why? She said, because I'm a boy, I can't sit on a pink chair. So I started noticing all of these little things in the classroom. And the teachers didn't do anything really. They didn't explain, hey, that pink chair doesn't make you a boy or a girl. You can sit on any chair. They didn't say anything. And I know that teachers have a lot of responsibility in the classroom. But I also think that there are certain things that you can do to try to implement these ideas that, you know, can help the atmosphere in the classroom and reduce that tension. And so all of these little things that I learned ended up turning out to the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy, because I understand that there is a really good possibility of quicker or more efficient solutions when the parents and the teachers or the administration collaborate and have a really good open line of communication. I think the other thing that parents don't understand is that by the time the child comes to the parent, many things have happened. And the parents go, you marching down to the school, and they're like, my kid did this. I can't believe that the teacher didn't see any of this. And it's because kids are not aware of the 4 types of bullying. I think that they have a huge misconception of what bullying and teasing is. So I tell teachers and parents, it's like, hey, break it down to their language, especially the younger ones. Bullying is just a way to take power from somebody else. Bullying gives you bad feelings, such as you're scared for your safety. You don't feel well, although you might not be able to understand exactly what about that statement that was said to you makes you feel uncomfortable. If you're trying to avoid somebody, that you might be bullied. That might be why. You have to ask more clear questions like, well, how did that make you feel? Good, bad, afraid, scared? Do you feel shaky in your body? Do you have, you know, some weird emotions or physical feelings? You know, all of these things are symptoms of bullying. Now let's talk about teasing, how you explain that, because it's always confused. So if you're being teased, do you feel bad? Do you feel, or just a little bit embarrassed, but you laugh it off? Or do you feel like that person came off with the intention of making you feel embarrassed or humiliated? Or, you know, is it always just on you? Because when you're being bullied, it's usually a constant. You keep being targeted over and over and over. When you're being teased, it's usually among friends or among people that you know of and you feel comfortable around them. If you trip and fall, you don't feel so humiliated, but, you know, in front of your friends. But if you trip and fall and it's in front of a bully, you kind of cringe and you know that something's coming. So just try to give them very descriptive scenarios. Use those key words of, are you safe? Do you feel angry? Do you feel scared? Are you fearful? Do you feel like throwing up? Do you get instant headaches? Or was that just funny and it reminds you not to do that again? Because, you know, a lot of us friends, sometimes we bring up funny things that happen to us to remind us to not do something again, or just to poke a little bit of fun. And everybody gets a piece of the pie, right? So you're not the only one being teased. Sometimes, you know, I have in one of my activity sheets a little scenario of 3 girls talking. And one of them shares, well, you know, when I get nervous, I stutter, you know, and, you know, the friends start stuttering to, you know, kind of make fun of it. And the other one says, well, I tend to just put my hands under my armpits and I'm just clutched in there and I look so goofy, you know. So things like that, those are examples that you can give them to know whether it's teasing or bullying. The other one that is very important, I think, for them to understand is reporting versus snitching or tattling. In schools and overall in society, there's a huge snitches get stitches culture. It is very powerful. And this is very unfortunate because we have the power to get rid of that. So this is something that I share with kids. When you need to report something, it is when you feel that you are going to be hurt, or the bully might be hurting others, or him or herself. It is really when there is danger and possibility of somebody getting hurt. That is when you report bullying or any other type of accident or incident. When you're snitching, it is when you just want something for yourself or you want to get the other person in trouble. Here are the examples. Johnny wants to jump from one desk to the other. Do you report that or not? What are the dangers in that? There are other people in the classroom, right? Is there a possibility that Johnny might fall and hurt himself? Is it possible that Johnny might fall onto others and hurt them? Yes. So if Johnny's not listening to you, which should be the first thing that you always say, he's like, hey, stop. That's all it takes. It takes usually on average 15 seconds for a bully to stop when somebody says, hey, stop, or hey, that's not cool. A lot of kids don't report anything because they're scared, or they don't intervene because they're scared that they're going to be targeted. But sometimes you don't even have to speak to the bully. Sometimes all you have to do is grab your friend, that person being bullied, and say, hey man, come on, let's go. Let's walk away. Don't listen. You don't even have to address the bully. When somebody is snitching, it's kind of like, when you were little and your mom tells you not to go into that cookie jar, and your sibling's watching you, and your sibling wants that cookie too, but they're following the rules. And guess what? You dive in, you grab that cookie, and then you hear your sibling ratting you out, right? And you're like, what the heck? You just got snitched on. There was nothing dangerous in that situation. There was, no danger upon your sibling. Your sibling just wanted a cookie, and they're probably just hating a little bit because you got that cookie. You dared to break the rules, and your sibling didn't. So that's the difference, and you have to break it down, especially for the younger kids. Break it down to those little scenarios. Johnny took my pencil. Okay, did you ask for it? All right, go and work it out in a nice way. Sophie wants to hit Michelle because she took her pencil. That's different. Now there's intent to hurt, so you report it. First, you always encourage them to tell them, hey, don't do that. And if they don't listen, you report it. So these are very simple examples. I mean, little tiny kids can understand that. Older ones, of course, very clear. But you have to tailor the language to that age and to the maturity level. And your kids very well at home, or if you're an educator, your kids pretty well. The other thing is explaining the 4 types of bullying. There's physical, the one that we all know of. The hurting somebody in a physical way, spitting, pulling their hair, yanking on their clothing. One that always surprises me, even with adults when I explain, is taking their possessions and destroying them. That's part of physical bullying. Something happened to me when I was a kid, actually. Anthony Westbury, I was very fond of him, although I never spoke with him. Anthony Westbury never spoke to me. I was that shy kid still learning English. And I remember I admire his freckly face with red hair. And one day, out of the blue, as we were putting our chairs up on top of our desk, he stopped and looked at me and walked forward. And I thought, oh, he's going to say hi or something. Well, he takes my notebook and he says, hey, if you want this back, you're going to have to chase me. And I didn't want to. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm being humiliated. I was like in the 4th grade. So he starts running around the classroom saying, come get it, come get it. So the bell was about to ring and I wanted my stuff back. I start running around after him. And then he stops in the middle of the room, the classroom. And next thing you know, I feel the wind knocked out of me. He drops my notebook and punches me in the stomach. and we both end up at the principal's office, and we both get expelled, although I never got the chance to swing back, though I wanted to. Back in the 80s, things were different. I don't know, now if you don't throw a punch, you get to stay in class. But that was, before the punch. It was already physical bullying because he was taking my notebook and he was actually like bending it around and stuff, destroying it. Same, you can give another example of, when they take a lunchbox and they smash the food inside. That's physical bullying because you're hurting something of theirs, and it makes you fearful. It's like, oh my gosh, if they did that to my food or my possessions, then what are they going to do to me? The other one is social bullying, and this one is so subtle, and it is done a lot among girls, unfortunately. It is the, taking away the power and the community of a person. So for example, we have Sarah and Johnny, and both of them have birthday parties. And they both bring in cupcakes, and both of them agree that Joey should not get a cupcake because he's not cool. So everybody gets that cupcake, and Joey is left in the corner. He's being excluded from his community. He is being embarrassed and humiliated in front of his peers. And suddenly he feels alone. And then, naturally, some kids think, oh, well, if everybody else is not speaking to him, then I won't either. There must be something wrong with him. So he's also being stigmatized. That is social bullying. So use those examples in your classroom or at home. If you don't want to invite so-and-so, well, why don't you want to invite so-and-so? What did they do? Well, so-and-so said this. Oh, so you're following gossip or rumors. It's part of social bullying. So also notice how your kids interact with others, because a lot of children don't realize that they're being bullies to others. Then you have things like emotional bullying or verbal. This one is so tricky too, because kids don't understand the words or keywords to describe what you feel or how it was done to them, such as somebody said something condescending to me. What kid knows what condescending means? Or you can give them examples like backhanded compliments too. That's another term. I remember a person saying, you're very articulate for being an immigrant. Or, you really almost don't have an accent for, being an immigrant. Or, you're very pretty for a fat girl. Or the other one is, you're not the sharpest tool in the shed. All of those are examples, and kids hear this stuff. Maybe not those specific examples, but they're out there. And sometimes they're said because you recently heard them and it just came out unconsciously. Sometimes you say other things because you want to express your frustration, but you don't realize that you're hurting that child. And though they might not be able to understand exactly, like, wait, what just happened? That did not feel right. So have your child try to repeat what was said to them, and those little subtle ways of verbally attacking somebody and diminishing them, it just breaks down that confidence for that child. And it makes it harder for them to explain. So you can use those as examples. Was it something kind of like this where they didn't say, oh, you're stupid, or you're so dumb, or you can't do anything? Because when you hear verbal bullying, that's the first thing you think of. When somebody's calling you the B word and the F word and the whatever word, but they're not hearing the, well, I thought you'd do better. That's very hurtful. Lastly, cyberbullying. This is something that I think that a lot of people underestimate, because they say, oh, I know what my child is doing online. Well, we don't know what the other people are doing and how subtle they're, sending messages to them. I want you to know one thing about cyberbullying and online safety. The majority of, attacks on children, I think a lot of people think that they happen on social media, but in fact, for girls, because they hang out more on social media, that's where it happens. For boys, it's usually gaming systems online or through the Xbox or whatever else is out there. And a lot of parents don't realize that there are chat groups going on, that they're very active. They think they're just playing video games, they're just talking about a game. But a lot of those devices and those softwares and systems have the ability to communicate in other ways. There's a whole class I can give you on this, like apps that are used to hide other apps, or, you know, there's settings and controls and on your television, on your gaming systems, on your computers, your laptops, your smartphones, your smart pads. It's exhausting. So I want you to think about taking some type of measure of monitoring your child's activity. I know that you have Google Classrooms, and one thing that happened to my child when the first year they implemented Chromebooks at school was that while the teacher had created a Google Classroom, the students were able to do a side Google chat room, and horrible stuff was said in there because they got into arguments. The other thing is that cyberbullying doesn't necessarily mean that you're saying blunt, horrible things. Cyberbullying might be, I'll give you an example, something I saw recently. Somebody had a disagreement about an event, and somebody got really annoyed and said, "You're stupid, I can't believe you would have that mentality," and went on. Other people beneath that chat said, "I agree, I don't know what you were thinking." So while that the rest of the people didn't say, "You're stupid, you blah 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 blah," they said, "I agree. You have just become part of the problem. You have just become a cyber bully because you are agreeing on the horrible things that somebody said." And the other thing is explaining to the kids, if you cannot say this to somebody's face, if you cannot say this in front of your parents or your church leaders or your grandparents, then you should not say it. Because when it comes to bullying overall, if you follow the golden rule, you will always know that you are not being part of the problem. Treating others the way you want to be treated, treating them with respect. Don't say anything mean. You know, if you have nothing to say, don't say anything at all. So that, in a nutshell, I mean, I can go so much deeper into every single subject, but those are, I think, the most basic things to start with at home, at school, at a daycare, at a Sunday school.
All right. Now, Dali, I want to ask you a few questions because I do want to dig deeper into some of these areas. So first, let's take it from the parent's perspective. So if you're a parent out there watching this and you have children at home and you want to make sure that they're not becoming the bullies, and all parents deal with this. I have 4 children of my own, and they're angels and they're wonderful, but even they have had periods where they've done mean things to other kids. So what kind of advice can you give parents on having these kinds of conversations at home? What's a useful way to bring this up with your kids and start the dialogue?
Ooh, there's so many ways, and I'm glad that you asked this question. So because kids don't listen if you sit them down and say, "Hey kids, let's talk about bullying right now at the dinner table." They're like, whatever, mute, you know?
Right.
I say use music and use television shows. And I'm assuming you know what they're watching. But there are so many good messages in a lot of television shows where you can, you know, once they're done watching, you're like, "Wow, that was so interesting. Do you think that was mean? Would you consider that bullying?" Just work it into your conversation. Or another way that you can do it is when you're sitting around the table, maybe you and your husband plan on bringing up a certain story of something that happened to you as a kid and use that as a lesson. Because when kids can relate and feel the empathy for somebody they care about, then they'll listen and they'll remember if something similar happens in their life. they'll remember like one thing. I tell the story of Anthony Westbury, the little boy who punched me when I was a kid. I remember the first time I shared that at the dinner table with my kids, and my daughters were so sad. I almost felt really bad because one of them was about to cry. I'm like, hey, 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 it's okay. You know, I'm okay, and I'll learn from it. But, you know, I just wanted to share that story in case you see somebody that needs your help. So I don't say so that you don't do it, or, you know, because sometimes it might feel like you're trying to attack. But the stories that are going to be most memorable are the stories that are more personal to them.
Yes.
So do share your own personal stories, whether it happened to you as a child, at work, just yesterday, or whether it was something that impacted you because you just recently watched it. I also brought up music. Music is very powerful, and there are so many lyrics out there that are not good for kids. And it's like this powerful, good sounding, you know, I don't even know what to call it, but it's just a very powerful movement, I guess you can say, with wonderful beats. But then when you start listening to the lyrics, it shocks you. And sometimes you're like, oh, I can't believe I was dancing to that, or I was enjoying that. So I tend to sometimes, you know, share that with my daughters. And I said, you know, I was trying to learn that song, you know, this particular song. And as I was reading the lyrics, I realized it's so misogynistic, or it's so, you know, women shaming, or it just portrays guys so badly. It's so horrible, you know? And they're like, really? And that's how we start the conversation. And they're like, wait, which one? So they're pulling it up, you know, like, let me see. And they get reeled in, and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, you know? So it's a lighter way and a little more fun. I think that when it comes to bullying, you have to try to make it as light as possible, because it can be very heavy, especially for kids who either saw something happen or who have already experienced something.
Right.
And it's, you know, the more examples, the more they know, oh, I should never do that, or I would never do that, or if I see that, okay, I know what to look out for.
Yeah, I think all of us parents can relate to the music example, because I know when I was a kid, I would learn songs, I'd memorize them, I'd sing them out loud. And it wasn't until 10, 20 years later that that song would be going through my head. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know all the words to the song, but I had no idea it was about
Right?
that, you know? And even songs that my parents warned me about, they said, my parents were very sensitive to music, and they said, you don't listen to that song. And sometimes they'd explain why, and sometimes they wouldn't. But now as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's why you didn't want me to listen to that song, because it's a horrible, horrible song.
Yeah.
So we totally get that. As you were talking about media and using that as an easy entry point, you know, television shows, movies,